You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from IVOXY Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Yette, and I'm joined alongside by my co-host, as always, Mr. Matt Cozzolino. Matty, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you to this wonderful day?
Yeah, not bad. It's a Friday that we're recording this on. I'm feeling a little loosey-goosey here. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah. It's been, well, we're about midway through February here. It has been an extraordinarily busy year so far, calendar year for me.
Surprisingly, all of a sudden it's February, right?
Yeah, and there seems to be no end in sight to all the stuff lined up. So I'm glad we're able to squeeze in these recordings. So it gives us a little bit of a reprieve from talking shop all the time, even though the podcast talks plenty of shop. And the one bit of shop I want to get out of the way first is I just got done doing a video. It's on YouTube and LinkedIn now and all these fancy things about the ESXi boot drive issue kind of shift. You've been running into this out there too as well?
I've been running into it with a bunch of customers. I've had to address my own home lab with that. So yeah, there's some fixes out there, and there's some stuff you need to do or stay, I guess, for the next 6 months or something on 7.
I mean, I think this sucks for everybody, but not that it's critical, but home labs especially, because home labs are shoestring budget kind of thing. Oh, yeah. And this is the antithesis of that. I mean, I got 1 million USB thumb drives hanging around. Great, use those. Burn them up. I don't care. But, yeah, now you have to invest in an actual disk. That sucks.
There's that. I think the thing that rubs me the wrong way the most is that there wasn't any runway to it.
Yes.
Right. There wasn't any.
It was okay, and then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Yeah, there wasn't any. This is going to happen in the next release or the next release or something. It was like, yeah, this should be fine. This should be fine. Actually, you know what? Nope, no more. None of this.
I still wish they. Well, and if in case anybody who's listening is not familiar, you can go to ivoxy.com. We got a blog there where we do this and talk about it. But basically, the old way of doing things on the cheap, on the easy, and makes sense technically too, is use an SD card or a thumb drive for your ESXi install. And that's
because what's ESX need to do? It just sits there and runs, right?
It boots into RAM.
Yeah,
actually.
Exactly.
Right. So your drive can crash, and they did, yes, but your drive could fail, and ESXi keeps chugging along. I mean, you can't make config changes and stuff like that, but it doesn't crash your host, so really not all that critical. Well, now they put more importance on that install.
So logging or something is,
Well, I mean, you can still redirect your logs, but it wants a scratch partition and all of this. Ultimately, when VMware says, we want to do all this stuff, and these drives are terrible and they fail. And they're not wrong, but at the same time, couldn't I just redirect the scratch stuff to a LUN or something like the same thing I do with my logs?
Some disposable media, some flash somewhere that doesn't,
Or just a little volume on my shared storage array where I put my logging already. But no. So if you're still using a thumb drive all by itself, you're basically considered degraded, and I'm guessing that's going to stop working. The other way, which is considered legacy, which is a bad word nowadays, but still supported, is supplement that SD card with at least a drive for the persistent stuff,
But then you get into weird installs and custom configs, and that just,
Well, you're still staring down the barrel of a change because they're going to drop the SD card support anyway. So if you're going to put another drive in, go whole hog to the quote-unquote recommended. Now it's put drive in and install ESXi on that, and just for that. So, and then the question becomes, well, do you want to do it in a RAID 1? Well, you should, even though if it crashes, it'll still run. It saves you the need to reinstall should it crash.
You just replace it and it rebuilds.
So now you got a RAID controller and 2 drives, ain't cheap, or one of those fancy nice M2 boot cards, which are great. But guess what? This change by VMware plus a supply chain. What do you think the lead times on those M2 cards are? There's a run on them,
right? Sometime next year,
right. Yep. So it's all kind of shaping up to be a hassle because using SD cards and USB drives was not some cheap hacky workaround. This was well supported.
It was for a number of major revisions,
this was the way to do it, and a lot of our customers have done it, and they haven't done anything wrong, and now they're looking at a bill of materials that they have to go if they want to stay up to date. It's kind of a bummer, but we're helping you through it, and trying to come up with creative ways. Boot from SAN is an option too, and it doesn't cost you anything more, but again, complexity.
Or a net boot and a DHCP server and a TFTP server, and do that number, right?
Yeah, but I just don't love boot from SAN. I just find that it puts in prerequisites to getting an ESXi server booted that I just don't love it. I don't love it.
I think a lot of these things are really cool to be able to do, neat things. Hey, look at this. Kind of like, you ever watch Big Bang Theory, and they had the light turn on through China or whatever? We send this signal out, and then came back and off on the moon and whatnot. It's a similar kind of thing to that, where it's really neat to do.
Like a Goldberg machine?
Kinda, right? And they're all sitting there, and they push the button, and they watch it ping and pong, and then the light turns on.
Right, and light turns on, who cares? It's the method that you got there.
Exactly. A lot of these things are that kind of a thing. So like that net boot or the boot from SAN, but they have their place in scale. When you've got hundreds of hosts, and you've got thousands of multiple data centers.
Yep. And then I live in the practical, right? I love
I've got
academic
my 10
has
hosts,
its place. The academic curiosity is fantastic to lab out and debate and discuss. But ultimately, if that doesn't make things easier, I've got no interest in implementing that with my customers because, look how fancy and smart we are. And meanwhile, this thing is so complex, it's impossible to manage. That's not what we want to do either.
No.
Yeah.
But hey, you get. I found a good learning experience as I replaced all of my lab boot drives. M2 and NVMe are different connections, different ports, different plugs.
M2
even
SATA,
though they're
right?
the same form factor, which I learned. I thought that was kind of neat. I actually did find a PCIe card that you can put an M2 drive in, but you had to have an onboard SATA port, because then you'd plug the PCIe card in, and then you'd plug that into a SATA port. So it was kind of this
the
weird...
PCIe kind of does its rating, and then it turns around and hands off the SATA.
I think it just gets power off of the PCIe bus or something.
Nice. One way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's kind of what we're dealing with in the office, so to speak.
One of the things we're dealing with in the office, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. But we've been coming up with topics to talk about, and one thing that, well, at least me, Matt, Mr. Yette over here, has been scratching lately. I don't know if I've always had a twinge of nostalgia. I think everybody loves nostalgia to a certain extent, right? I mean, that's a human nature. But what is your project? What's your poison, right? And for me, and I don't know if it's the birth of my daughter or what, it's kind of like I want to be that old guy who's got all these old computers in his shop and he tinkers with. I've been following a couple of like x86 Dreams on Instagram, and this guy's showing like old Tandies and C64s, and I'm like, ooh, I'm liking that photo. But retro gaming it's funny. For background stuff, I'll have this guy in England who streams Final Fantasy VII and does speedruns. And this game came out 25 years ago, and the music, everything else, and I love it. And so that extends to so many different eras growing up, back to when I was 10 years old all the way to, in my 20s, and different ways we can preserve that, right? And so, modern gaming is, I think I've played the remake of Final Fantasy VII, but in terms of modern games, I don't really video game anymore.
That's I've got that same kind of thing. I've played some, but a lot of the games, a lot of the nostalgia and things that I enjoyed out of gaming, you can't do these days with the mainstream games, and it's hard to find what I'm looking for specifically is a couch co-op, something I can sit down with a friend. Here, have a controller. Here, have a controller. And we're playing off the same screen, and we're working together and doing that kind of thing.
I remember those days of GoldenEye when, same screen, like you said, in college, we would forge a divider. So we would come up with a couple pieces of cardboard and then duct tape that to the frame of the TV, and then you had to sit in your little corner or stand or sit, so you couldn't creep up and look at where the other player was.
There you go.
Awesome.
That was one of them. GoldenEye, and that was the N64. Is that retro now though?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay,
No
cool. So
doubt
I've got
about
some
it.
more we
Yeah.
can talk about then.
Oh yeah. So my main, when I think of nostalgia, there's really one company that comes to mind, and that's Sierra Online. If
Yeah.
you're out there and listening, they were basically one of the first companies that made gaming a thing on PCs. And so you may be familiar with Quest for Glory, King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry, Phantasmagoria, The Bizarre Adventures of Woodruff and the Schnibble. That's a good one. It's a little obscure. And LucasArts, which I don't think it was quite as prolific, but in terms of popularity, you've got, I think, the Sam and Max games, Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, and Day of the Tentacle, which is just maybe my favorite point-and-click adventure of all time. You've got Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, right? Those are the LucasArts games, and Grim Fandango is considered the greatest one of all time, too. So that's all of those things I absolutely love. And then I start to play them, and I don't have the patience. Like, there's so many things fighting for my attention.
That was my issue even back when I was a kid. Was like, let me sit down and play this game for a minute, and then I'm, bored after 45 minutes and want to go do something else. Right?
Yeah. Well, it certainly is now. I mean, back then, there was, when you're 14 years old, I don't think you value time as much, and the idea of, I have 3 more years of school to go. Oh, this is going to take forever. I can't wait to. And now it's like, please slow down.
Well, those years are a big portion of your life at that point.
Yep. So I did a couple of things. The other maybe a little more modern to my video game obsession when I was a kid, but I loved NBA Jam. Did you ever play that in the arcade or outside your grocery store?
No, I've had
vestibule?
I've had a kind of I've despised basketball for a minute. It's not been a thing, and so the basketball games, the sports games, no, never got into them.
It's funny. You'll have to come by the house and see it, because when I say NBA Jam and you say basketball, and I'm like, the thing that makes this game awesome has nothing to do with basketball. It isn't, but it's all the announcer, and he's on fire, and the secret characters, and the big head mode, and everything, and just so Arcade 1-Up is a company, I guess, that's been effectively tapping into this market now that these people are 40 years old now and have disposable income and so they've been making cabinets, and then I think they're using emulation, but they are
inside of the cabinet.
And I have an NBA Jam cabinet now. It's a little bit smaller.
Is it full size stand up,
scale.
or is it like a desktop?
No, it's full size stand up.
Okay.
When I say full size, I think it's smaller than what you would have at But again, the last time I stood at an arcade cabinet, I was 30 years younger.
True.
So everything seems larger when you're a kid, right? So,
right. Yeah.
But I still think these are a little bit small. They stand like 5 feet tall.
Okay.
Something like that, and so
it's probably a bit smaller to fit in people's garages and whatnot.
A little
but
bit.
It's
You
don't have a giant CRT to fit in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Although now you go on eBay looking for those, and they're jacked up because they're all retrofied, right? You go for a Magnavox 17-inch monitor for $300. Yeah, baby. But so I've have that in the shop now, and that is pretty stinking cool. It even has online. They've integrated online play too.
Yeah.
Which is neat.
With an arcade game.
That's
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
4 players. It got the deck with all the buttons, and you can do up to 4 players. It's pretty great.
All right.
Yeah. So that's fun out there. If I'm out there working in the shop or, just kind of chilling out, I can pop that on and play that.
Nice.
But yeah, that's a lot of fun. But you were telling me earlier you didn't really play them that much, which I think diverges from the nerd stereotype that I so paint you with,
Right? That stereotype that I should fall right into. Video games were never a thing. I'm going to blame my mom a little bit for that, because she'd pretty religiously kick me in the butt and kick me out of the house and say, go play outside. Go be outside somewhere, and no, you can't have a video game.
Look at you humble bragging over there.
I mean, now I drive a friggin' desk, so hey. I don't know. I didn't have the games. I didn't have the patience to sit down with them. I think they combined mom doing that, and then not really having access to them, not really having them in the house, combined to I've never been good at games, so I'd never make it past the first little bit, and I'd have to restart and be back at the beginning. So I've like played the first.
I hate the restart.
Played the first 3-4 levels of Super Mario Brothers 7,000 times, but never anything past that.
Well, that's because you have to use the warp pipes.
Right.
The warp zones.
Yeah.
Well, my mom was one of 7, so
you have 7 moms.
I one of 7 siblings, and so I have 6 aunts and uncles, and multiply. I have a good amount of cousins, who are all mostly in my same age. And so growing up, especially during summer, quote unquote, summer vacation, right? We'd go to one of the aunts' houses, and there'd either be a Nintendo or a Sega Genesis or something. And I remember the OG Nintendo. It was Power Pad.
Okay.
And it was I think it was Track and Field was the game, and you would have to run, and they'd have like the long jump. And
you have to go back and forth, BA or something to run, right?
No, the Power Pad.
Okay,
no, this is the thing that you stood on. I think we talked about this, where the trick when you're doing long jumping is you would run, and then you jump to the carpet next to the pad and wait till the last possible second, and then slam down with your hands and you set the record on the long jump. But we'd play that like my family would have a Super Bowl party. They'd be out back watching the Super Bowl in the back room. We'd be up front playing
video games.
Track and Field. Yeah,
nice.
So that was a lot of that for me.
Yeah.
Tyson, I beat Tyson and Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
I think
which is still one of the greater accomplishments I could attach to my life.
I think the most gaming I actually did was I was in that high school, just before high school years, and it was I actually got plugged into EverQuest and then World of Warcraft.
Oh, Evercrack?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they're all kind of the same, right? Yeah.
They call it Evercrack because it was addictive. I worked in college, you would have been in high school, a few years older than you, and I worked at a store called Computer Renaissance,
right,
which is kind of like an electronics boutique, but for hardware. And when the update came out that required more RAM, there was a run on memory at the store.
Always.
People were coming and buying RAM sticks.
Yeah, of course. I don't know. EverQuest and then World of Warcraft. I think that's where I discovered if I'm going to do a character like that, I like doing the Necromancer, where I can cast and then steal life and then burn health and then get my mana back.
There's that nerd.
That's the one. And I, honestly, I've been kind of kicking around like maybe I want to find another something like that, and I can't get into them anymore. They're just so loot boxy and steal your money type stuff, and it doesn't appease to me.
That's unfortunate too, because you can have principles now where it's just like you could look at I'd like to do that, but I don't want to support that kind of model for the game or whatever too.
Right. I mean, there's a bit of a change there too, right? We'd go to the video store and I'd rent my video or a couple of videos for the week. That was the thing, right? We'd go to the store and they'd have the $5 Tuesdays or whatever, and you get five movies and a video game, and we'd play that because you could borrow the disc or you could borrow the cartridge or whatever, and then bring it back. And there's none of that anymore, right?
No, well, they have they have Redbox, but I mean that's not it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the retro gaming started a few years ago too with those. You've seen them come out with the mini consoles.
I've got one of the old Nintendos, one of the new Nintendos with the old games on it that they came out with.
Didn't it come with comically short cords for the controllers?
Oh yeah, they're like 2.5 feet long or something. They're super short.
So you got to get a big long HDMI cable basically and bring it if you want to sit away from it. Yeah,
but that's actually great because you can throw it in a bag or a box or something, and when when you're down at a hotel downtown going to PAX or whatever, and you want to hang out in the room for a minute, you can plug this in and everyone can play Super Mario Brothers or something.
Do you still have that? Monitor, the laptop monitor, the traveling?
The one that plugs into
monitor?
My laptop, yeah.
Yeah. Does that allow for HDMI input?
That one specifically, no.
But they make ones that do, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, just go get a 18-inch monitor and set it on your desk.
But I'm saying throw it in your bag with your retro gaming console, and away you go. Yeah, that's cool. Well, so do you know what an FPGA, FGPA.
Yeah. I know that. I know that term.
FPGA. You're running to Google. I'm going to try to beat you to it.
Oh, yeah?
So it's a field programmable gate architecture.
Array.
It's array?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least that's what Google says.
No, they're right all the time. And
Wikipedia. Yeah.
So here's what's cool.
Yeah.
I just stumbled across this now. So I've heard about these things, and somebody redid a Nintendo with one, something like that. They recreated the CPU in a Nintendo
because now we've got enough programmable transistors.
Effectively, it's almost like an arrangeable. The way it seems to me is it's a hardware processor, but it allows instructions to remap its physical layout or the way things flow.
Yeah. So you can make it into a custom whatever you need it to be.
Right. It's
trade-offs.
You're not right. Mm-hmm. So there is this project called Mr. And so let's take a quick step back. One of the big open source products out there in the retro gaming is called RetroPie. Okay. And the idea is you load this on to a Raspberry Pi.
I remember MAME from back in the day.
And that's
where it came from. Yeah.
And so Pi would run RetroPie. MAME would be one of the cores that run on RetroPie. Okay. Right? MAME allows you to emulate a lot of the arcade stuff. But ultimately, RetroPie remains emulation. And emulation continues to improve as the hardware gets faster. Different consoles are possible and this and that. And, but what you also then get to, and what is it, Rule 34 or whatever? Like if there's something like, there's a community for everything. But there's also there's always, it's amazing, right? You just come across something happenstance casually, and there's a deep, dedicated community to that thing, and they know so much about it. And so with the retro gaming, there's a drive for accuracy and fidelity, right? Okay. Pitch perfect. Emulation, it can get close to perfect, but then there's lag, or perceived lag or not, there might be lag, right? Does it act exactly as that original arcade hardware? And the answer typically is no. No. And they could point to any number of things. So this Mr. project, I just found out about this. It uses an FPGA, and it effectively, you download cores, and those cores are written to reprogram the CPU to be the actual processor that the original core ran on. Okay.
So it emulates actually.
No, it does not emulate.
Actually operates as the original core. Yeah. Okay.
Because imagine coming up with, let's say you've got 100 arcade cabinets. Think of the investment, the space, the power, the maintenance, everything. You can do that into a single box now.
Right.
And you're actually not emulating, which is just crazy to me. But
that's cool.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So, and that's been blowing my mind. So, again, this is one of those things that it would be relatively inexpensive any other time. The supply chain makes all of this brutal. I have a need for some Raspberry Pi Zeros right now. Forget about it. They're $15. Why not? Right? I can buy 10 of them.
You just can't get them.
If I want to go on eBay,
and how much
10 times as much.
Oh gosh.
Right.
Wow.
Right. So that's really been hurting a lot of that. But same with this Mr. project. The parts it uses, it's called a nano something. The board that it uses. And then you can build off it. You can add memory and do all of these things. But ultimately, you're in for a couple $100.
Yeah.
But that's really, I mean, when you think about what a RetroPie can get you, and I am a big fan of good enough too. Like unless
that's
it's truly impacting you. But if you really want the best and you want that to me is fascinating. And the fact that arcade machines back in the 80s and 90s and the way it works, and there's a lot of technology in there that wasn't just using off-the-shelf hardware, very custom stuff and pretty neat. And that's also had my wife is a big fan of pinball.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, shit, pinball would be a fun thing, right? So I go online and look. Oh, $6,000! I didn't realize that real pinball machines had a real market and cost like real money.
There's a lot of mechanics that go around into them. There's a lot of physical moving parts, and they take care and feeding, and you got to lube them. And
Yep.
Yeah.
And the problem too is this is not something that Amazon can just drop ship on your door either.
Not that.
So they're not very mobile, and you wouldn't want them to be, right? You wouldn't want to have it shipped. That thing would shake and rattle and probably break
Fall
half
apart,
the stuff
yeah.
on the way over. Yeah. Especially given its age.
I had a guy I worked with years ago that was into collecting arcade cabinets, and that's where I got MAME from. He was into the retro gaming at that point, and he was into restoring the cabinets and refinishing them and rebuilding them and finding the glass and making sure that was all appropriate. That was the big thing then. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, people have taken these arcade one-up cabinets and dropped a pie into them, and then they get a video converter board that can switch, and then they drill out holes to put in new buttons and joysticks and switches, and that's fine. But I like the fact that this is an NBA Jam cabinet, even though it's new. It's not like a retro one.
Yeah.
I do like having it there, and it's got a couple other basketball games on it. I got the Pac-Man one too, and not the tabletop. The actual one where you sit on either side, and it's a flat top.
Okay.
So it's that style.
Okay, right.
You can put your
God, I remember
right
that
on,
in
right
like in the pizza place.
Pizza Hut.
Yeah, we had a Godfather's that was they had the buffet, and you could have the buffet and a salad bar.
This sounds like Pizza Hut to me.
I mean, right? I grew up in Port Angeles, so I don't think we had a Pizza Hut in Port Angeles, and so that was the pizza place. I grew up in
Little Falls, and I still had a Pizza Hut. We're like, my town was dumpier than your town.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do remember going over to my friend's house and playing on. He had the N64, so we together, mostly him, worked through Zelda, and then we'd play Cruisin' USA. Those were the two games I remember playing on the Nintendo 64.
Did you ever play Cruisin' at the arcade?
And that was the other one, was going and being able to sit down in the car and have the wheel. Yep.
That was so much fun. I would always love to drive as a school bus.
Yep.
School bus. And I would always do automatic because I, as a 12-year-old, couldn't shift or the concept. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Now as an adult, I'm like, ooh, I want to do the manual shifting. And this is I was in my 20s at this point after getting out of college, but a buddy of mine who's a bit older than me, who was into NASCAR big time. He liked racing. He built a cabinet for NASCAR, but it was one where you had multiple monitors that would wrap around your head.
That's cool.
You could turn your head and look, and it basically gives you a 180-degree view front and side of the vehicle. And he's got a real shifter and a real I think a clutch, like an electronic clutch or whatever.
You can get the whole pedal pack and get like the whole setup there, yeah.
And the wheel that gives you the force feedback and everything, and you can actually do like a Daytona 500.
That was actually one of the cool things in the Nintendo, was like you'd have that rumble pack that you could. Right, that's when that first came out, right?
Dude, Nintendo deserves such an amount of credit in terms of video games, and like the Wii. You could look at anything and call it gimmicky, but they've been pushing the gaming industry forward for a good long time.
And they haven't like diverged into this weird esoteric place. They're like focused on, we're going to do gaming and it's going to be good and it's going to be consistent, right? They've got that, and but
they were the first with Rumble, I believe, and yeah, that was awesome.
I think it was Star Fox or whatever came out with that. That's what it was. Was you get the game, the Star Fox, the Star Fox, and you get the Rumble pack with it and that kind of thing.
But it was a pack that went into the back of the controller. Yeah,
that 3-handle controller. Yeah.
Oh man, and everyone was like, "What are they doing? What are they doing?" And then they were the ones that introduced the analog stick to it in terms of at that generation, the analog stick. What are they doing? And yet that controller ended up being emulated and borrowed and copied and iterated, and which is typically the long and short of it. You were talking about Resident Evil earlier. Tell me what your experience with this was.
So that kind of goes back to the renting the games. So there was one night in particular, I had a friend over. So this was high school, I think. I don't think we could drive yet, so it was like, hey, let's go. Mom's gonna pick us up. We're gonna stop and get some pizza and because pizza, like Papa Murphy's or whatever, was right next to the video store, and we rented a game, and it was Resident Evil, and we legitimately stayed up the entire night and played that game, played through that between the two of us. But that was, I distinctly remember it because it was, one, we stayed up all night, and then there was some like, holy crap, that game actually scared me.
Yep.
Was that was a piece I remember out of that.
There was I think it was Resident Evil 2, and I think it was on PlayStation. And my buddy had rented it or bought it or whatever, and I remember the scene of running down the hall from the back of the screen towards the foreground, and out of the left side there's a window, and this dog jumps through the glass, and I remember legitimate jump scare, like that was scary. And the other one that was scary and funny at the same time was a game called Clock Tower. And there was a scissor bad guy, Scissor Man, who would come after you, and I just remember like scared at first, but then turned into like a joke. Scissor Man's going to get you.
Yeah.
We were 14 years old. It was amazing.
So most recently, I want to say in the last couple of years, I had a friend of mine let me borrow his 3D goggles, the VR headset, and there was a zombie game. Whatever mode we were in was like just hold your ground basically, and you're in this like warehouse, and they're just kind of coming at you. And there's a difference between you're staring at a screen, oh, there's something blinking behind you, so you got to pivot, use the stick to turn around and look. And you're here and you're looking, you're in the VR headset and you're looking forward, and then you have to look over your shoulder and there's this zombie like right behind your head. That was most recently. I went, oh God, crap. Terrifying.
So what game would be great with that kind of that immersion would be, did you ever play Dying Light? This was somewhat, I had an Xbox 360 and I bought it for Xbox One. Dying Light is I think it's a zombie. I think they're zombies. I mix up zombies and vampires and...
Aren't they the same thing?
No. Oh, shame on you.
No, they aren't.
But anyway, it was a game that used parkour as basically your movement. You're able to jump up on buildings and grab and swing and kind of climb up. Yeah, and but it's a lot of speed and running, and you go out and have to run missions after dark, and that's when it really becomes. And the game's terrifying. It's adrenaline and everything else. It's a great game, but I can only imagine doing it with a headset like that, because one of the buttons on your controller is actually look back over your shoulder. You can hear them snarling behind you and chasing you. You look over and
see what's right behind you. Yeah,
I can only imagine with a headset. Yeah, I still think the headset thing. I'm waiting for it to be. I know we talked about AI in the metaverse in the last episode. I just don't know, Maddie, about the immersion factor. You have to. One thing can take you out of it, right? Tactile. You could get 99% of it right, and still you're removed from that immersion.
Yeah, but you can use that same argument for video games themselves, right? We went from the side-scrolling Super Mario to here's my first-person shooter, and that's not the same. That's not fully immersive, but it's
not supposed to be.
No, but it's a step forward, right? And my first-person shooter's got a little bit more of that. Let's add some more stuff, so you're looking around and interacting. And here's this next little bit. Here's this next little bit. You told me, we said at the beginning of this, good enough is not the downside of perfect, right? You don't have to be perfect for stuff, right? So
I almost feel like maybe unfairly, but I'm holding this thing to that standard almost because
you want it to be perfect.
It doesn't need to be perfect, but it ain't good enough yet. How about that? I think the good enough bar is if you're going to aspire for. I always go back to it. Dragon Naturally Speaking, Siri, 95% accurate somewhere. Is not.
You got to be able to fail. You got to start somewhere and be able to fail to be able to move forward and make that progress. And if you don't you can't.
I am not convinced that AR, VR is not the modern day 3D in the movies. Yeah.
I did want to play, there's an explosive game, Keep Talking and No One Explodes. I did want to play that as a VR game, because then you can hold it. Have you ever played that?
Is that a co-op one?
It is. That's honestly that's my favorite type of gaming is the co-op where I can work with someone. So kind of a reason I like board games. Like Pandemic's a great one because you
taught us how to play that. Yeah.
So Keep Talking and No One Explodes is, I want to say it's who's online, who's got the Steam. I think it's a Steam game.
Okay.
But what it is I give you or whoever else. Like, it's one person gets the computer, one person interacts with the bomb, and everyone else has the bomb manual. And so no one else can see the screen, but you've got this bomb, and you're like, hey, so I've got this thing to debug or not debug, disable, diffuse, yeah, and I've got another thing over here to disable, diffuse, and I've got another one over here to diffuse, and I've got these 3 wires, and they're this colors, which one do I need to cut, and I've got these symbols, and they're this, and which one do I need to symbol? So you have to communicate with the rest of the players, and they have the manual that says, hey, if you've got this bomb, and the serial number is this, and it's got 3 batteries on it, then you cut the blue wire that's second down from the top.
Are they all in the same room with you, or can you do it with another family in another house?
You could do it. I mean, as long as you can talk. Like right now, I could launch the game and say, hey, go download this PDF, and that's the bomb manual.
So it's on iOS.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's on Apple TV too, because that could be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Part of the super nerd in me wants to be like, here, let's get our radios out. We'll start an ICS.
Is it kind of like an escape room then?
Yeah, kind of. Though it's not like finding and puzzling. It's really forced communication, right? If you had the debug manual there, you could work through it. And like the difficulty comes with the fact that it's word problems. So you have to kind of like when you had the math and so and so's leaving Canada at 300 miles an hour on a train, and so and so's leaving New York at 30 miles an hour on a bus.
Right.
Where do they meet? There's that kind of stuff. So you have to go through those kind of questions and communicate what's happening and ask the right things, and they're logically built together to be able to defuse it.
That sounds cool.
It is.
Yeah, I just saw somebody's. You could do it remotely as long as you have voice somewhere else too. So that's maybe we can play that sometime.
Mm-hmm. I thought the nerd in me thought it'd be fun to get some of the Ski Patrol friends I have together, because they understand ICS and we do that on a fairly regular basis.
Sure.
And like, I'm on the radio, you're the comm desk, this person's diffusing that, and how do we...
You can be efficient with it, sure.
I mean, probably not. It probably adds way too much to it.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, so it's one of those things that, I have limited time. We all have limited time in our lives, but with my daughter being born, it's my free time is way limited. So I'm trying to pick and choose. But I am feeling very projecty lately.
Yeah. I
want to tinker and do this kind of thing, and more so than in a long time, actually. And I kind of almost get a dopamine, like an adrenaline rush, like when I feel like, ooh, I've got all these things in front of me that I can, to get to the end result of this, it'd be cool to start tackling these things. And I'm kind of feeling that way with a few things. So I got my shop area cleaned up. I got my beer tap collar back on my kegerator.
On your kegerator, yeah.
The most important thing is I saved the space by actually putting the collar back on the kegerator, and it's not sitting on the floor.
There you go.
Efficient. I'll start
efficient.
Brewing some beer, But and then we're going to talk about it next episode. But I got a couple 3D printers that I want to dive into.
There you go.
And I'm not artistic at all, but those models need airbrushing. So I did paint the Day of the Tentacle, purple tentacle and green tentacle.
There you go.
Models that are awesome. He's looking at me right now with that hairy suction cup, saying I'm going to take on the world. All that good stuff. So. Yeah, so I mean, if anybody's got any games that they really like to play or like retro stuff, send us an email too. We'd love to chat about it and see what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So outside of that, Coz, I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on, but this VMware ESXi boot stuff, retro also, right? Making local hard drives great again, apparently, bringing that back retro style. Yeah. So yeah, if you are not yet following us on LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, you should be. Yeah.
You absolutely should be.
Subscribing to us on...
Smash the like button. Good Lord,
iTunes
I can't talk.
And Spotify. We're everywhere. We're everywhere, baby. So, if you've got questions or topics you'd like to hear us chat about, or maybe even want to join us as a guest on one of these podcast episodes, hit us at podcast@ivoxy.com. Yeah. Maddie, thanks again for an awesome chat. This was fun.
Thank you, sir. It was fun. Tons of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone out there, for listening to Data Center Therapy. We will catch you next time.